Hey gamer, how'd you like my new whip? Just check out the engine on this bad boy. Yeah, that's the stuff. The year is 1712. Thomas Newcomer has built the first ever engine. This amazing invention will go on to change the world forever. Ever heard of that thing called the Industrial Age? Oh wait, wrong engine. Since the dawn of Pong, games have been hard to make. Game developers would struggle with very easy, simple games like, look at this Pong game. All you're doing is just hitting the ball from one side to the other with these little paddles. This should be easy to make. What is this? These days, game developers use game engines, which act as a framework to help build the game. This means you can make a game faster and easier. But this wasn't always the case. In the 80s, video game developers will build their game up from scratch. Arcades being the big boy at the time, it made sense. With set levels and rules, you couldn't really use the same code twice. Now sure, they made some video game construction kits, but they were only used by baby indie developers. Who cares about them? They'll never get popular. But seriously, there were a few game engines around, but they were mainly only for adventure games, so they could just pump out as many games as possible. To be honest, game engines never really got popular until the 90s with the rise of 3D gaming. Now 2D was simple. You just had up, down, left and right. But 3D added a whole other dimension of complexity. And since they were working on all kinds of systems to make 3D work, they decided keeping code and using it again seemed pretty useful. Okay, so now can we finally talk about Doom? Holy Jesus, fuck! So the year's 1993, a little group called id Software had just made Wolfenstein 3D and popped up out of nowhere to say that their new upcoming release would push back the boundaries of what thought was possible, changing the gaming world forever. And to say it did would be a fucking understatement. Ever heard of the Doom Age? No? Well, I made it up, but it's pretty good though. The game was great and popularized FPS, but what really made it amazing was the secret sauce underneath. The Doom engine. This engine was revolutionary for the time and pushed PC hardware to the very edge. Oh no, it's gonna fall off! It had a lighting system which changed the brightness of surfaces based on the distance from the light source. This was a very easy and efficient way to simulate light. It used binary space partitioning, which cut the map up into small segments, telling the renderer what to show based on what segment you're in. Like, this looks 3D, right? Well, no, it's 2D, but those sneaky bastards tricked us into thinking it's 3D with their fancy algorithms. Look, you can't even aim up and down. It's all bullshit. It did have multiplayer, which was kinda crazy for 1993, but it was nearly impossible to set up. But if you somehow managed to be a 1993 genius, you'd be living it up in land, boys! But possibly the most influential innovation they made was how they organized their engine. They separated the core engine files from the game files. This meant you could edit the game however you wanted without breaking the engine. Now it was all like, you want a new map? Bam! You want a new cinematic movie? Bam, bam, bam! You want sexy textures? Bam, 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 bam. Over time, game engines got more complex. The build engine let you aim up and down now. Zingin, one of the first true 3D engines, was released by Bethesda of all people. Oh, how far you've fallen. It was used on Elder Scrolls Daggerfall to show off its potential to create a giant world. Like, look at this. Every dot on this map's either a town or a dungeon. It's fucking huge. It was a great engine for the time, but it never really caught on because, well, bugs. What did you expect? It's Bethesda. Good old George Lucas jumped into the ring as well with his Jedi engine. The absolute mad lad improved game engines by having 32 viewing angles for objects, which would rescale in real time, giving it that extra 3D look. This is a lot fancier than all the 2D sprites everyone else was using. Even added the ability to jump and crouch. That man basically made Solid Snake what he is today. In 1996, Quake came out with its fancy new engine. This was id's first 3D engine, and since they made Doom, it kinda had to be good. So to add a little spice into the FPS world, they added 3D lighting to make the game look prettier, but to make it run faster, they used a couple of new features. They still used binary space partitioning, but now they coupled it with Z buffering, which let the renderer distinguish between polygons that are visible to the player and polygons that are blocked by other objects. This meant it didn't have to waste time rendering those polygons, and you could just go zoom around the map. One day later, Mario 64. Nintendo used its secret Hush Hush game engine to craft what people believe to be the best 3D platformer ever. It was an engine specifically designed for the N64, and it was used for Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. I'd probably talk more about it, but information isn't really public because, Nintendo. So Valve, you know Valve, the bald guy with a valve stuck in his head. Well, he saw Quake engine and thought, wow, that's a pretty good engine, but we can do better. So a young Gaben scrapped about 70% of the code and rewrote it to make the Half-Life engine. I mean, I thought some of the Quake shit was pretty cool, but not Gabe. He wanted more. He threw in a custom map editing tool and added skeletal animation for more realistic characters. This madman's engine brought you Half-Life 1, and later on in the Source engine brought you Half-Life 2. Thank you, Gaben. Mwah. Mr. Fortnite was also on this scene at a similar time too. The Unreal Engine released with the goal of competing with Quake. It was supposed to strictly just be a FPS engine, but would later get popular in other areas like platformers, fighting games, MMORPG. RPGs kinda makes sense when you're doing MMO and RPGs, that makes sense. So the year is 2000, and 6th gen console. Unlike the last generation, these consoles were a lot more popular. That meant... Wait, did you hear that? Where the fuck did that come from? You might not have heard of it, but Renderware was quite possibly the most popular game engine in the early 2000s. This was because it was optimized for the PS2, and if you know anything about PS2 games, they made a lot! Renderware wasn't just used on PS2 games, it was pretty versatile and could be used on multiple platforms, but seeing as the PS2 is the most popular game consoles, most of the time they just slapped on Renderware and called it a day. You probably even know some of the games. You ever heard of GTA Vice City? Renderware did it! You ever heard of GTA San Andreas? Renderware did it! You ever heard of Tony Hawk Underground? Renderware did it! You ever heard of Burnout Paradise? Renderware did it! You ever heard of Harry Potter? J.K. Rowling did it, but they use Renderware for the games. You ever heard of Persona? Renderware did it. You ever heard of Need for Speed Underground 2? I have a video for it. Also Renderware did it. And that's just a few of the games. There's a lot more of them. A lot more of them, and I don't even know if this is all of them as well. Unreal would eventually take over Renderware's mantle, as Renderware's reliance on CPU rendering eventually became its limitation, while Unreal could take advantage of the ever-growing GPU hardware. Look at the speed of this bad boy. It's growing so fast. Oh, holy shit, it's on fire! So if Doom with the Doom engine pushed PC hardware to the very edge in 1993, Crysis with the Cry engine was the Doom of 2007. The only difference was, Crysis took that PC, beat it with a sledgehammer, covered it in petrol, lit it on fire, launched it 10 miles off that cliff into the waiting embrace of a shark's mouth. At the time, the Cry engine was one of the most graphically intense game engines, and Crysis was used to fully show off what that game engine could offer. It was pretty much an engine showcase that got a little bit out of hand. I mean, for 2007, it was basically like going... It had real-time lighting. With a day and night cycle, the light would act naturally, making shadows change along with the environment. It would even make realistic-looking light beams and shafts that would poke through the tree branches. Ooh, look at it, looks so real! For 2007, you You can do that now, it's 2020. Being an open world game, it made use of CryEngine's terrain LOD management, which would remove details as it got further away from the player. This saved your PC some work, and boy did your PC need some help. The physics engine was powerful. One of the major features was the destructible environments. These objects will follow predetermined characteristics to break apart. You could shoot a gun at a tree and a piece would break off, or you could hit the beam of a building and let the roof collapse in. It was pretty complex, but not as complex as its advanced rope physics. Now this is real innovation. Look at that rope. Look how it moves. It's art in motion. Is this a real feature? Luckily for your PC, the physics engine was multi-threaded, which helped a lot. But seeing as it's 2007, the best you could get was a dual-core processor, which, little hint, is not even close to being good enough. Not to mention, you had to process the fancy new character animation system, which would use audio wavelengths to animate facial features, giving them a realistic-looking lip sync. This was probably the last time a game took full advantage of PC hardware and the game engine. Afterwards, developers would just create games for consoles, limiting the potential of what could be created. Don't believe me? This is Crysis 1. This is Crysis 2. See a difference? Yeah, Crysis 1 looks better, and it was so much older. Game engines these days are, well, you've basically got the three big boys and then the rest. That's not to say the rest are bad. They're actually all pretty good. They're just not the three big boys. Choosing between the three really depends on what features you prefer. These days, everyone's got graphics sorted out. Now sure, Unreal's the best looking out the box, but if you're willing to put the work in, you can get similar results on Unity and the CryEngine. Unreal's just the big boy engine with lots of pro features. If you want to get the best out of the engine, you need a big team which is dedicated to each aspect of the game. That's how you get these insane levels of detail. Small teams can still get good results too. You can even do it on your own, but it has so many features, newcomers can sometimes get intimidated. But for those intimidated developers, or just indie developers in general, you've got Unity. Unity is great. A lot of processes are simplified and you can make a basic product much faster than Unreal or CryEngine. It was designed to work well on low-powered devices, and yes, that does include mobile gaming, because if you know one thing about 2020, mobile gaming makes money! Although saying all that, you don't really need to know how to code anymore. A lot of engines have a visual coding system where you can just connect pre-written code using little wires. Look, I made a Pong game using one online. I made the ball real big. I mean, you won't make an entire game using it, but it'd help you get the hang of the basics. I think Unreal has the best version with Blueprint. So now the real question in everyone's mind. Money. It's actually not that bad. Mr. Fortnite does like money, but Unreal is free, with a royalty model that charges 5% when you make over $3,000 every 3 months. Unity's a bit more complicated and can range from free to $150 a month. Although that still depends on how much money you make and if you want any more integrated features. Now CryEngine isn't free, but the whole package is included, which in the long run could be cheaper than the both of them, only costing... oh wait, they recently changed the payment model to royalties. The big two then. I mean, in the end, there's nothing really between game engines anymore. Unreal's a AAA engine which is trying to add features to become more indie friendly, and Unity's an indie engine which is trying to add more pro features to become more AAA friendly. They're just similar engines packaged differently. You don't even have to use those two. You could probably pick something out the rest pile and find something that works for you. I mean, making video games has never been easier, and it's all thanks to the advancements of game engines. You're free to explore any idea without being held back by dirty math and algorithms. The barrier to entry is being lowered, and anyone can make a game anywhere. I mean, you could probably make a game on a Samsung fridge if you wanted to. Unity works on Windows 2000, so it's not that far off.